All right, Corey, whenever you are ready.
In today's episode of Quality Time with Family Ties, we learn that anybody can watch anything for 22 minutes when they know they only have to watch one more episode.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the penultimate Quality Time with Family Ties, where the quality time is up and the family ties is down.
Wow, that was very Leonard Bernstein's, On the Town.
Thank you,
The
thank
box
you.
is up, the battery's down. Wow, our penultimate, our next to last episode. Although we do have an hour-long episode next week, correct?
But if I do recall, Corey, I think next week's hour-long series finale is going to be a nice episode. It's going to be a good episond.
Okay, I'll take your word for it because they certainly have taken enough weeks off writing shit like this episode.
Yeah.
And I only say this episode is shit because it is, and I think you'll probably agree with me, although I have no idea. There's just a lot of stuff that's that we've mentioned before about Nick, and it's a little bit worse in this episode than we've ever seen before.
Mhm.
And then Steven goes in the other direction, and it's just to me, it's like bongers. It's like, well, okay, enough of this. This is just so silly.
Right. Yeah, this episode it's season 7, episode what, 23?
24.
All right, whatever it is.
I know it's hard to tell because it's numbered differently everywhere.
Right, what's the title?
Mr. Keaton Takes a Vacation.
Which doesn't even happen.
Nope, does not happen.
So that's weird, first off. Yeah, this episode is all about Nick has to have some work done on his apartment, and so he's going to live with the Keatons for a week.
And it said somewhere towards the middle of Act 2, and I think it's well worth repeating up front. He's been dating Mallory for 4 years.
They say it in this episode.
That's what I'm saying. It's said in Act 2, and it should have been said up front. Because if you say it up front, the things that bother me about this episode is the fact that they've been seeing each other for 4 years. And the conclusion that he reaches at the end of the episode in the front door finish, in this case, not the back door finish, but in the front door finish in this episode, the stuff that's said in that scene should have been a given already, because we've never, as we've said over and over again, ever seen any evidence of the description that Steven has played out for Nick.
Yeah, the whole point of this episode, folks, is wrapping up and loose ends and tying them into a bow of Steven's relationship with Nick. Of all the episodes, of all the plot lines that Family Ties has, they tied up Lauren and Alex, and they said they're not going to be together anymore. They decided Nick and Steven is an important plot line that we need to devote energy to explain why Steven doesn't like Nick and if that could ever be worked out. And that's what this episode is. And they waste 24 minutes to do it.
Exactly. Because half of what you just said, why Steven doesn't like Nick, makes no sense. I still don't know. At the end of this episode, he may have said it, and what he said was nonsense. The reasons why he doesn't like Nick, that he's never going to amount to anything.
He doesn't know that.
The kid's 24 years old. He's 23 years old. Who looks at a 23-year-old and says, 23? End of story. He's a nothing. Especially when the kid is an artist. Especially when the kid seems like a sweet kid who's been really sweet to all 4 of your children.
And he's had multiple jobs since we've seen him. He worked at a shoe store because Steven wanted him to get a job. He's done art, and he was the toast of Cleveland or Columbus, Ohio, when that woman feted him around. He's done quite well for himself.
So to make this square peg fit into a round hole, What the writer of this episode did was ridiculously make Nick super annoying.
Yeah.
And in 4 years, I have to say it again, Nick's never been super annoying before.
No. And the way that he's annoying in this episode is by being overly nice.
Think characteristics. What occurred to me was he's almost playing it like he's Skippy Handelman.
Yeah, absolutely. His energy's way up. He's very different. He's very neurotic in a way.
Right, there's a physical quality where they're trying some physical comedy where the elbows are always seem to be where Steven doesn't want them. It just everything was just sort of akimbo especially in that second half. And there is a very long ass scene of shtick, a couple of them in this episode of like, wow, almost like they wrote Bill Irwin and David Shiner scenes. Like, oh my God, brilliant comedic moments of, wow, that was a wet fart, boys. That just didn't work at all.
Yeah, yeah. Breaking Bad, this is not. As far as going out on a series and being like, how do we want to go out in the last couple of weeks? Well, we'll waste some time doing a clip show for an hour. We'll do this one weird thing that could have just been a conversation in an episode with Nick and Steven.
And they shove in this one a B plot, which they're fairly persistent with in shoving in our face in this episode, and that is Elise doing the family's taxes because Steven is working on a Tolstoy documentary.
And they waste so much time discussing the fact that Alex, until this year apparently, has always done the Keaton family tax. Like, I think that was a joke in an early episode where it was like when he was 5 years old, he was doing their taxes.
Absolutely. And the other repetitive thing that they've tried over and over again is the fill in the blank joke. Steven is working on the documentary, fill in the blank.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this case, it's Tolstoy. And one of your favorite recurring Lotsy gags, Corey, is that instead of bringing big books, it's lots of books.
Oh, my good Lord. Does this kill me? When that prop guy thinks, oh, my God, the show's not funny, I have to visually make it funny.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, boys, what? You just ask the writers to write some jokes instead of trying to make it funny in the prop department. Boy, it's just stupid. So we opened the show with Elise doing the taxes, and pretty much everyone in the family sort of laughing at her, including Andy, that she's even thinking of doing the family's taxes.
And this is interesting because it was in like the late 70s, early 80s that the tax code became much more complicated. And that was on purpose in order to put in more loopholes for businesses and the rich. And so at the time, Corey, when you were a young man, you probably were able to do your own taxes, right?
Yeah, well, I was able to use the 1040 form, which was incredibly simple to do. You just filled out about 4 or 5 lines. It was like doing the W-9 when you get a new job, and you have to fill out like 3 lines. That was what like your income taxes were.
And I've never done my taxes in my life.
No.
So and that is something to keep in mind, is that like this is the beginning of a change in Americans' relationship with taxes, and that this family and the Keatons are looking, and the way that they're talking about taxes in this B plot, Corey, what do you think? But like that it's a game to be won.
Oh, absolutely. It's beat the government. Sure. Whatever you can get from the government.
And again, this is the beginning of this sort of internalization of libertarian, anti-government Reagan stuff. Like, this is 1989. Reagan has won. He's started the snowball rolling down the mountain of the shit show that is the anti-government hate that we currently live under.
Boy.
The distrust, all this stuff, and it all began with making taxes something that you don't owe to society. It's something that if you're smart enough and you're rich enough to hire somebody, you can get money back.
And what that does also is it forces people in the middle, even if they're well aware of what the tax money goes for, infrastructure, schools, protection, we're well aware of that. We still want to cheat the government because we know that the rich are getting away with murder. So then the middle wants to actively look for their own loopholes, lie a little bit,
Right.
so that they can keep more of their own money.
And I mean, it was such a case in point in, I would say, 2012 with Mitt Romney not releasing his tax returns, and that he only paid like at best 13%. And at the time, it was an embarrassing thing, but at the same time, he kept doggedly saying, "I paid what I owed." That was like his talking point. I
Sure.
paid every dollar that I owed to the government. And
Mhm.
then with Trump not releasing anything, he actually turned that into a strength by saying, "I'm smart. I was smart enough to beat the system." And because we've had almost 2 generations of Americans buy
That's
into this game theory of how taxes work, they're
Mhm.
like, he fucked over the government. I want to be able to do that. He's so
Absolutely.
cool. And he becomes this aspirational, nihilistic symbol.
Um, in this episode, there's a series of Tolstoy jokes, a series of PBS jokes. Um, uh, Andy and Alex claim that they're the accounting firm of Keaton and Keaton. Alex throws in a nasty, nasty joke at his mother, saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
I found that objectionable, and it was like, really? I thought you guys could have found something better to say than that. I hate calling a middle-aged woman an old dog. I think, especially when she's as attractive as Baxter Burney is.
Yeah, it was shitty, and it was just not necessary at all for the joke, and the way they reacted to it felt uncomfortable in the way that the actors didn't like doing it.
Absolutely, it did feel there was a moment there of like, okay, they could have gotten rid of that. And then Mallory comes in, and her first word to Stephen is, and this is all you needed to know, Daddy. How many times we heard Mallory calling Stephen Daddy? So she wanted Daddy to approve the fact that they're painting Nick's apartment, and she would like Nick to stay with her family for a week. And she also promises, and this is where it starts right away to fall off the rails for this very reason. She promises he'll stay out of your way. Now, when has Nick been underfoot to Stephen Keaton?
Just by breathing, he's been underfoot.
And I just have issues. It's like, dude, he's never hung. He doesn't hang out with he goes up to Mallory's room. They go out of the house. They go to his apartment. They drive somewhere. It's not like he's hanging in the living room, taking the remote control and putting on whatever he wanted to watch.
Yeah.
So the warning, he promises he'll stay out of your way, was like, okay, well, now he's going to have to get in his way for him to stay out of his way. And that's pretty much what we got for the rest of the episode, was Nick getting in Stephen's way for the first time.
Sometimes actively trying to pacify Stephen and try to like be like, hey, he got him like a cup of tea and surprised him with it. And we'll get to it. But like,
And we end this scene with, instead of ending the show with a backdoor finish, we end the scene with a backdoor finish, because as it turns out, Nick is sitting in right in front of the back door of the kitchen, and they open it up and he's in. There he is.
ooh, sight gag.
Yeah, it was a real big sight gag. We go to the living room. They're on the B plot again with the taxes. And they're trying to figure out the sleeping arrangement for the evening, on who's going to be sleeping where. Everyone's in their pajamas. And so this was the start of another really awkward moment that sort of angered me again. Okay. And we've had this discussion before. So Mallory says that Nick likes to sleep with his feet pointing north. And it dawns upon Elise and Stephen, how the hell would she know how Nick likes to sleep?
Wait, are you trying to say that they've slept together? Together, echo, echo, echo.
And even in 1987, or was that where we are? 89. Even in 1989, sleeping together was not unheard of for a 20-year-old daughter who grew up with a healthy relationship. She's not on the pole. She isn't a stripper. She's in a loving, committed relationship for 4 years. She's got a boyfriend. She has a job. She's in school. I don't know. They have a loving relationship as far as I can see. No one's abusive to each other. They love each other. They say they love each other. It's monogamous. I'm sure they're smart enough to use protection. I don't know, Stephen. Why are you acting like you're a fucking idiot Neanderthal living in 1621 and she's going to have a giant, A on her chest?
Yeah. This plot line of dad not let daughter fuck, dad control woman body by guy who remind dad of dad when young. It's this awful trope that you see in so many family sitcoms from time immemorial. And I'm sure if you watched whatever the shitty Last Man Standing with Tim Allen that's about to like come out again, that's gonna, because he's got like 3 daughters or something. I'm sure that's all he's gonna, like, every episode is gonna be about some guy trying to fuck his daughters or something. And it's just so gross because it's so much about ownership of women. Like, that's what this is. This at base is that Stephen Keaton doesn't like that his daughter is dating someone that he doesn't approve of. And it's just like, she's an adult. She's gonna date whoever she wants. I don't understand why you factor into this one whit, my friend.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just wrote down Stephen Keaton. Come on, really? I mean, get a grip on it. This was a very, very unpleasant side of Stephen Keaton that they wrote and that they've written before. And then it turns late in the scene into a trust issue. Can I trust her? I can't trust her. Of course I can trust her. So he starts to walk upstairs like everybody's going to sleep. So the lights are all low in the living room. And what does he do? He runs and he gets a chair, sticks it at the top landing of the staircase with like a camping flashlight. And he's going to sit sentry duty all night long and make sure that Mallory doesn't go and sleep with Nick.
My God, with all of this planning and militaristic fashion, if only Stephen Keaton had just gone to Vietnam. I think if he wants to be so gung-ho man about this, then go fight for your country or something.
And we've said this before, it's out of character. This is someone who's gone through the revolution, the cultural revolution of the sexes, and he should be a lot more woke in 1989.
And early on in the series, Corey, there were those episodes where they were talking about sex openly, and like Jennifer, who was like 12 years old at the time, was just like, "Dad, something sex," and he was like uncomfortable with it. But like, this family should have been way more left wing.
Absolutely.
And every time they pull back to this like understood least common denominator of, well, you can say that you're liberal, but at heart you really, until you get mugged, then you're a liberal. Like, that sort of bullshit is what this entire series is all about, especially with regard to Stephen Keaton and his constantly disappearing ideology.
Absolutely. We cut to so now we're in the early morning. Stephen's fast asleep, like splayed out in his chair, and Mallory sort of sneaks in and gets Nick and like, "Shh, here's our chance. Dad is sleeping. Let's go." And they get up from the couch. She gets Nick up from the couch and they run into the kitchen, giving all of America the impression, even though we've never had this impression before, that they have wild sex on countertops in the Keaton kitchen while two younger children and one older child are sleeping upstairs, and mom and dad, with dad sleeping on the stairs. And as it turns out, dad runs in like, "Aha, I caught you. You were going to fuck right in my kitchen, weren't you?" And it's like, "No, Dad, we were going to make breakfast for the whole family."
As like a thank you for letting him stay there for the week.
Again, Nick's a decent guy. He's always been a decent guy.
Who, let me ask you this, Corey, just as a hypothetical as we're wrapping up this series. Who should Mallory have dated, according to Stephen Italy's? What did they want out of this girl that's going to be going to probably Fashion Institute or something for a couple years, or interning in New York at a runway or something?
Don't you think they would have wanted Alex P. Keaton to be dating Mallory? I don't mean specifically, but someone like Alex P. Keaton?
Just some Wall Street douchebag that can bankroll her?
Absolutely. And they wouldn't have to worry about it, but someone who had some social skills.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like, again, just like the tax plot line in this episode, I think this is a question of the precariousness of the, to use some Marxist terms, the petite bourgeoisie, and like this middle class that you were talking about, Corey, that worries so much about what the rich are doing, and so they're going to get theirs by going and fudging their tax returns and stuff like that. That all these two are probably the first in their families to have gone to college, probably, type thing. Like, if we're gonna, maybe not for Elise, but probably Steven, seeing who his dad and mom were and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they think if we let our kids backslide at all, like they have to be going out with someone better than them.
Absolutely. We always have to improve. If we backslide at all, we're not doing our job.
As opposed to, quote unquote, being happy.
I was just going to say, maybe you could just relax a little bit and realize what he realizes at the last moment of this episode, that perhaps his daughter's happiness should be the most important thing in his life.
Yeah.
As a parent should just worry about their child being happy and not how he achieves necessarily that happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a shtick here at the end of this scene, and all I wrote down was horrible shtick, and I just don't remember what it was.
After like a 5-minute conversation in the kitchen, Steven pretends that he was actually sleepwalking once he's realized that they weren't having sex.
That's the shtick.
And yeah, that's as exciting as it sounds. And then, is that the commercial break?
That is the commercial break.
So with that, folks, we'll be right back. And we're back.
That was the last commercial break in a half-hour episode. That was the last commercial break in a half-hour episode.
Yay!
So go working on the taxes.
Man, how could you? And she got an extension. Why didn't she do this sooner?
I know, and because it was going to take her 7 days to do it. Jennifer fires off one of the only funny lines. She calls something. Does she say someone? Who does she call H&R Blockhead? Which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, probably Alex or something.
Mm-hmm. And so Elise calculates the taxes and finds out that she owes the government $3,000. At that exact moment, as fate would have it, Mallory runs in with the mail that had just seemingly arrived with a check of her tax refund for $800. Alex P. Keaton did her taxes.
Now, I just want to point this out again, folks. It could very well be that the amount of money that they made and the amount of deductions they took and all of these sorts of things, maybe, perhaps, perchance, Stephen and Elise Keaton actually owe $3,000 to the federal government. That could actually just be a thing that exists. But no. What it is they're being cheated. They're not playing the game as smartly as other people are, like Mallory is. And so, as opposed to accepting that they owe $3,000 because that's just what happened this year, no, they're going to cheat the system. And that is the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, the American way.
Mm-hmm. You're right. It is.
Just lock up everybody. Honestly, just lock them all up.
And ooh, my television just went on.
Are you watching baseball?
I am. I have it frozen in the playoff wild card game.
Oh gosh, who's playing?
Yankees and I don't know. You live in New York, right? The New York Yankees are playing. Why does it? Oh, it's because I've had it frozen for so long.
Oh,
maybe I record it and then.
Or put it on mute. Let it play and put it on mute, so that way you can at least
change the vernacular. That's just what I did.
Yeah.
Put it backwards. I'm recording it anyway. It makes no difference. So Nick then we start right after this B plot nonsense. We start an incredibly long sequence of Nick irritating Steven.
I just want to point out too, not that it matters in the slightest whether they slept in the same bed together or not during this time, that they not at one point during his saying, "Hey, can I stay here?" or Mallory saying, "Can Nick stay here?" and stuff like that, or the night when that first night, at no point were they ever like, "Oh, we're going to sleep together," and then people were like, "Whoa, stop!" They took it upon themselves to say, "We're not sleep out of respect for you. He's going to sleep on the couch and I'm going to be in my room."
Of course.
I just want to point that out.
I know, of course, because Nick has, for the most part, other than the irritating personality he exhibits in this episode, has been one of their most consistent characters that they've had. He's been consistently considerate of the Keatons, nice, caring. I don't know. And Steven consistently hates him. And Elise pretty much throws Steven under the bus, like, "Oh, Steven, you've always hated him." Later on in this episode, she says that. And it's like, you've both fucking hated him.
Oh, yeah. Like, they try to make it seem like Elise is cool at this point.
That's exactly what happened. It was like, I've watched every episode of this fucking show. No, that's not true. That's not the way it worked.
Oh, by the way, Corey, I just want to point out that even in the penultimate episode of this series, they fuck up in the beginning of the B plot when Steven is researching all of his Tolstoy, and he says, "I remember I was going to have that test when you were going into labor with Alex, and I was going to name him Sasha, whatever the fuck." And it was like, no. They were in Africa when she went into labor with Alex. Remember that Christmas episode?
Absolutely.
So they can't even get it right when it counts.
No one there. That's what scares me, is the fact that there's nobody ruling the chicken coop. There's no one protecting their brand, their show. There should be someone who's present, who cares about their show and protects it like a jewel.
Yeah.
It's just really funny the way they do that.
The show Bible for Family Ties is literally just the Bible, and someone was like, "Oh, I guess that's fine."
It's the same as the holding place for a joke. They were hoping that they'd get to writing a Bible. It just never happened. We ran for a long time. We never wrote one.
Yeah.
We sketch it out every year. In July, we sketch it out. We break the stories, but then we run out of them. I don't know. It hasn't gone well lately.
They break the stories and then never fix them.
This show actually broke the stories the last couple of years. They really did. So we go into another scene here where there's a lot of discussion about Nick going and spending time outside of the Keaton home at the Heidi Ho Hote.
I think you see where this is going, folks. But if you're as dense as Nick in the scene, it's the Heidi Ho Hotel.
And why does it say the Heidi Ho Hote?
Because the L burned out. Ha-cha-cha.
And Lanford Wilson didn't cover this with his Obie Award-winning play that's been produced for 900 fucking years, The Hot L Baltimore. That wasn't covered. He didn't do it, and now we don't have to do that anymore.
I can't imagine that Gary David Goldberg knows who Lanford Wilson is. To be fair to him, Corey.
Okay. Maybe it's just my theater degree from the 70s.
Yeah.
Now, I find this scene so endlessly annoying because it's a scene with Nick confronting Steven and ultimately saying to Steven that you've never given me the chance to show you who I really am. And then says, you just think I'm a dumb guy. Then he says, you just think I'm just whatever the writers have written for me over the last 4 years is what he says. Okay, well, that's what they wrote you. Sorry. You just think I'm a guy who has a mullet and grunts a lot and talks like this and like is an artist. And yeah, that's pretty much what we think. Yeah, that's what they wrote you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he really conveys the fact that he feels bad that Steven thinks that Nick, is no good for their daughter. And that's what hurts his feelings the most. The fact that he thinks that the Keatons don't feel that he's the right person for their daughter. And that really bums him out because he loves her.
Of course. How could it not bum you out?
Mm-hmm. And the scene ends with Nick leaving and going to the Heidi Ho Ho.
Oh, I just lost you there for a second, Corey. What was the last thing you said?
The scene ends with him going to the Heidi Ho Ho at the end of this.
Right. You know, and ever since we got a president named Donald J. Trump, you look back before that and you think to yourself, when you look at like the politics and cultural arguments that were going on in the past before 2016, and you're like, oh gosh, you can see the cognitive dissonance of arguments that are being made, and you're like, oh God, how could I ever get along with that person? Or how that you were able to let things slide, you know? And the person that I would like to indict right now is one Ms. Mallory Keaton. That she had a relationship going on for 4 years with this guy who was constantly over and a constant presence. And if your parents are giving you that much shit constantly about your boyfriend and giving him disrespect, I think you owe it to yourself to have a confrontation soon and or leave and go live with him or get your own place.
Because if you have the confrontation and the parent says to you, well, under my house, then that's when you say, okay, I get it. And that's when you got to get a job and go and move somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to me, I just want to for a second.
She's being disrespectful to Nick ultimately. That it's like it's like the mother-in-law, the husband's mom, who's a constant presence in the marriage, being sort of a bitchy shrew in the stereotypical way to the wife,
right?
And the husband never saying anything to his mother. He's a coward not to say, hey, don't treat my wife like that.
Right.
You know, as opposed to waiting for the wife to go, hey, don't treat me like that. Well, no, you should really stand up. I don't care. And this isn't male standing up for female. The inverse of this would be true as well.
As in what we're talking about here with this episode.
Right. Or the female should be standing up for the male. She should have enough balls to say to Steven and Elise, hey, you have really been off target and mean to my boyfriend who I love and who loves me and treats me very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this should have been something that came up sooner in Family Ties. It makes Mallory look like a bad character.
Yeah. And it's one of those times where we go, oh, wow, you sort of whacked her legs right out from underneath her just to service this one storyline.
And I want to point out that at no point in this episode does she really stand up for Nick that much.
No, what happens at the end of this show is totally a result of, well, it starts right at the beginning of this last scene with the ridiculous comment that Steven says to Elise that, have I not been nice to Nick? And it's like, holy shit, dude. Wow, you have no self-awareness at all. You've been a horrible human being to him.
Why would you even ask that question? Like,
I was like, dude, how do you even think you've been nice to Nick?
Like, you actively dislike. If you ask me right now, Corey, what I thought of somebody who I disliked, I wouldn't be like, oh God, did I actually dislike them? Did I come across as like someone who
Donald J. Trump?
Corey, okay, so do you think that I dislike him? Has there been anything that I've given you that would support that hypothesis?
A few things, yeah.
Gosh, that's not what I wanted to come across. Like no. What the fuck, Steven?
I know, like, really? That's so, like, Steven, all you've projected when Nick has been mentioned is it over? Are you still around? You're a loser. You don't know how to read. Hey, you guys are stupid.
It's a bad relationship, the Keatons and Nick.
Mm-hmm. And and Nick has been almost good-humored about it.
Yeah.
In fact, I wrote down Nick continues to be very sweet in this scene, and he says that he came back. He rings the bell because he's back at the house to pick up his toothbrush because he left his toothbrush.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute he arrives, in sort of a comical but yet incredibly predictable moment, because we know where this is going, they all decide to leave Steven and Nick alone at the exact same moment. Like, whoop, we know how this is going to go. Let's all of us get the fuck out of this room.
It's a classic front door finish, folks.
It is. It's a front door finish. That's exactly what I wrote down. It's a classic front door finish. Nick comes in, everybody scatters, and we're left with the apology, usually left for the kitchen, this time for the living room, where Steven says, I'm really sorry, and I sort of get it that you love my daughter, and you're not a bad guy after all.
And there's a moment that I was actually kind of happy with the writers, where Steven's like, you know, Nick, I feel like I've been kind of shabby to you the past few days, and I literally said years, and then Nick said years.
Years, you're right. He said the joke.
And what was interesting was Scott Valentine, Nick, delivered it with this sort of like stolid, like he's firm and he's serious.
Absolutely, it was a very real moment for a character that this, but it was like, okay, if that's the truth, that's been the God's honest truth. You've been horrible to me for years.
Yeah.
And it ends, of course, with some little joke. You could see even where this was going, where there was going to be a hug, and Nick was going to reach in for the hug, and Steven was going to regret being nice to him to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to point out again that the trope of it being about two guys passing off a woman, that this entire last scene of the apology and stuff like that, Stephen Keaton owes his daughter a fucking huge apology for making her life hell for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
He should be in that scene too.
Mal looked great in this episode. She wore a couple of costumes. There was a couple things she looked great.
Yeah, she was like very like she was working in fashion type thing. Like they were very hip outfits.
She was a woman working in the fashion world in this episode. I thought that looked great, especially for being as late in the season as it is. She looked terrific, and I'm looking forward to our ultimate, our finale, our series finale.
I don't want to make any promises, folks, but I've been told by promising sources, Scott Jones might be with us in our series finale.
I think that's very sweet and naive of you to think that that's going to happen. I think that's very hopeful and wide-eyed and innocent. And that's the difference between being in your 30s and being in your 60s. I have no confidence. I have 0 degree of confidence that Scott will carve out 45 minutes to spend with us. It may be an hour though. The next one. Well, no, let's still make it.
We'll see. I just want to. I don't want to out Scott for any of his health information or stuff like that. But he texted us today, folks, because I said, "Hey, do you want to record tonight?" Because at a time in the past, he said Wednesday nights would be good, and I texted both of you saying, "Hey, do you want to record tonight?" And he said that, and I'm not. This is not true. Something along the lines of like he invented a disease that had been defunct. Like he was like, "Oh, we have typhoid, and I can't record tonight."
Now, Paul, I know you're not a baseball fan, but just a couple of weeks ago in the New York Mets season, having foot and mouth disease is a real thing that you get from children.
Oh, okay.
Childhood disease. And Noah Syndergaard, pitcher for the Mets, got it after doing a charity event with some sick children. He got it and he missed the start this year for having foot and mouth disease. Then the week after that, another Major League Baseball player on another team missed the start for having foot and mouth disease.
Wow. So well, Corey, I have foot and mouth disease because I didn't realize that it was a common thing. So my foot is firmly planted into my mouth.
Unbelievable. So maybe Scott did have it. I don't know. He's got 3 kids, including, one who's probably just about out of diapers, one who's definitely in diapers, and one who's just in swaddling.
Yeah, I mean, he has so many children. The odds of one of them having something's got to be.
Oh, it's got to be good. So if you think, and look, we are hemmed in by your performance schedule, so we can record, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday next week. So the options are limited of what Scott can do. So I'm just on the edge of my seat waiting for him to confirm with us when he's available.
I mean, we'll have to talk. Brian, cut the scheduling stuff out if it's too inside baseball. Ha ha ha. But yeah, maybe we can do some evening, like Sunday evening or something, if that will help him.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, and so folks, I just want to say this too. As we go into our series finale, we have a big surprise announcement that we will be giving to you in next week's episode. So please tune in for that.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a surprise to all of us.
Anything else, Corey, with our final half-hour Family Ties episode?
It was an ordinary episode. I'm glad that we didn't have any other guest stars in this episode. That it was just sort of Nick and Nick. It was Nickalicious.
Yeah, I appreciated, because I remember in the old days there used to be only one plot line. So I took little things. I was like, hey, remember there was only one plot and now we have two? I was counting my blessings.
Yeah.
Those blessings are quite meager, but they are.
But they're blessings nonetheless.
So, gang, rate and review our show on iTunes. I mean, come on, how are people going to find our final episode otherwise?
Exactly. If you haven't rated or reviewed us yet, I don't know what's taking you so long. It's been 7 fucking seasons.
I know. Maybe I should rate and review our show. I still haven't.
No, I haven't either. For
questions and comments, email us at qualitytimewithfamilyties@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at QTWFT. Also, I am at Paul Packler.
I'm at Corpep, and Scott's at Follow Jones.
Can you imagine someone tuning in at like season 5 and not knowing who this Scott Jones person is, and that they would still follow them?
I know. Hilarious.
You're like, I have no idea what he feels about anything, what he talks about.
But I follow him so I could get his fresh takes on Maisie's diapers.
And you can like our page for Quality Time with Family Ties on Facebook. We'd like to thank our host and producer, Barbara Dillon, at Fanbase Press. Fanbase Press is a comic book publisher and an online community supporting creators and fans through daily reviews, interviews, and podcasts that span the pop culture spectrum. Fanbasepress.com. We'd like to thank Perry Adams, who beautifully performs Family Ties and our theme song Without Us. Check out her website, perryadams.com. We'd like to thank Bryant Dillon, who created our fantastic drawing and artwork, as well as edits our show. Bryant is the president and co-founder of Fanbase Press. Follow him on Twitter at Comic Book Slayer. And finally, Sean Foster, Fanbase Press's graphic designer, for designing our logo. Gosh, Corey, we only have to do this one more time.
One more time. I'm very excited. Very excited.
I'm getting a little choked up.
Yeah, foot clamped.
Bye, everybody.
La 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 la.